tested plenty of gaming mice over the years, some that made me struggle, and others that gave me confidence in every match. Now it's time for the ROG Harpe II Ace. After spending some time with it, I can tell you this. It's not a flawless mouse, but there's definitely a few things that can make it stand out. And the first thing you should know, the ROG Harpe II Ace comes in at $160. That puts it right alongside other flagship models, so ASUS clearly isn't aiming for budget session, but straight at competitive players. It weighs just 48 grams, about the same as small protein chocolate bar, making it an ultra lightweight mouse. On top of that, it delivers an 8K Hz polling rate without any extra hardware boosters or clunky software. Everything is managed online through GearLink, which feels like a breath of fresh air compared to ASUS usually tools. The Harpe II Ace arrives in classic ROG package, a big product shot on the front with the specs laid out on the back. Inside, besides the mouse itself, of course, you get a full-length USB-C cable and extender, spare PTFE feet, stickers and grip tape. But for $160, I honestly expected more, specifically glass feet. PTFE might be the standard, and it does glide well on the cloth pads, but glass feet offer a completely different level of control. And sadly, ASUS didn't include them here, not even as an optional accessory, and that feels like a missed opportunity. The entire Harpe Ace series feels a lot like the Logitech G Pro, which I have been using for years. And that just confirms ASUS nailed the design here. Compared to the Harpe Ace models we have tested before, the bottom switches are now slightly shifted upwards and no longer circular. The RF dongle slot has also been moved higher, making room for much larger PTFE feet that now cover more surface area for smoother and more stable glide. And honestly, the first time I felt how smooth this thing glides, I caught myself smiling like a kid unboxing his very first gaming mouse. It's that kind of satisfying. The ROG Harpe II Ace is one of those mice that adapts easily to different grip styles. I naturally lean toward a claw grip, and here it feels excellent, stable, fast, and let's say without that awkward sense of my hand sliding around. Thanks to the subtle curve at the top, it also works well for palm grip, while fingertip might feel the least natural, but it's still perfectly usable. I have, like you see, larger hands and usually prefer smaller mice for quicker reactions, but the Harpe II Ace surprised me. It's compact enough to stay fast, yet it fills the palm just enough to avoid fatigue during long sessions. And on top of that, the AimPoint Pro sensor combined with 8K Hz polling rate, which runs without any extra adapters or software, keeps the speed and consistency exactly where you want it for competitive play. And now, when it comes to tracking and glide, the ROG Harpe II Ace relies on standard PTFE feet. That means it works well on almost any surface, whether it's cloth, hard, or even glass mousepad. However, if you've ever tried glass feet, you know it's completely different story. Glide and control are simply on another level. And that's why it's a bit disappointing that ASUS didn't include at least a spare set of glass feet in the box. For a mouse marketed as competitive, this would have been a smart and valuable addition. During testing, I paired the Harpe II Ace with the ROG Sheath II Mousepad, and over the last, let's say, 10 days, it proved to be an excellent match. The surface is about 150% smoother than standard cloth pads, and thanks to the fine, low-profile stitching around the edges, there's no annoying friction when moving your mouse. ASUS markets this pad as being made from cooling fabric. Now, that doesn't mean the pad literally gets cold, but the material does a better job of dispersing heat. In practice, that means when your palm or wrist rests on the surface for hours, it doesn't heat up the way standard cloth pads usually do. It stays, let's say, more comfortable over long sessions, which actually makes a noticeable difference. And the good news here is that thanks to the larger PTFE feet on the Harpe II Ace, like we can see, the glide on this pad feels smooth and consistent. No stuttering, no sudden drag, just a balanced mix of speed and control. In other words, you will need very little time to get used to it. And now, when it comes to battery life, the ROG Harpe II Ace really surprised me. Fully charged, it lasted a solid 11 days with around 7 to 8 hours of daily use. By the end, there was still some juice left, but I plugged it overnight just to have it ready for the next day. Of course, keep in mind I didn't push it too hard in non-stop gaming sessions, more intense, constant movements in competitive titles. I think would likely drain it faster, so I would leave a bit of margin when setting expectation about battery life. And we tested it in what ASUS calls ROG Zone Mode. 8K, great, with no RGB lighting. You activate Zone Mode by holding both side buttons and DPI button for 3 seconds. After which the mouse switches to maximum performance, 80 Hz polling rate, sensor in always on mode, and lighting completely disabled. If you ask me, it's perfect for competitive matches where every millisecond really counts. And as for the software, ASUS finally nailed it with Gearlink. Okay, on the Falcata keyboard it felt a bit confusing, buggy at times, not always applying settings correctly, and even showing mismatched colors between the software and the keyboard itself. But with the Harpe II Ace, it's the completely opposite. Everything works smoothly, precisely, and exactly as it should. Honestly, it feels like a proper refresh, and I was genuinely surprised how polished the whole experience is now. Specs on paper are one thing, but the real test is always in-game. Over the past several days, I switched to Harpe II Ace for CS2 and World of Warcraft, and the difference in precision was instantly noticeable. The sensor performed flawlessly, no hiccups or skipped movements, even when running at 8K Hz polling rate. Compared to the Logitech G Pro, the Harpe II Ace feels much lighter and, in my opinion, clearly ahead of that legendary mouse. Honestly, if ASUS decides to gift me this unit, I won't mind adding it to my collection. Jokes aside, the G Pro is still an excellent mouse, but I feel like its sensor is slowly showing its age, and realistically the Harpe II Ace could be the one to finally replace it as main daily driver. Especially when you enable Zone Mode, which pushes everything to maximum performance, it really feels like using hardware built for the competitive scene. The ROG Harpe II Ace turned out to be a very pleasant surprise. It strikes a great balance between weight, design and performance, and the new Gearlink software finally feels smooth and reliable. Here, hardware and ergonomics are very strong, and with its 8K polling rate and AimPoint Pro sensor, it clearly delivers for competitive gaming. Is it perfect? Not quite. I wish ASUS had included glass feet in the box, and its size might be intimidating for players with smaller hands, but overall, this is a mouse I could easily see replacing my daily driver and becoming part of my permanent collection. That's why the ROG Harpe II Ace earns 9 out of 10 rating and the WASD Supreme Award. If you found this review helpful, consider subscribing for more. If not, not worries. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.